Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we are listening to disturbing cases you have ever heard. This is Boys in the Oven.
Two of my kids are dead. What do I gotta do? They dead. She left them dead in the house by themselves. Oh, okay, ma'am. Where are you now?
Oh, wow.
I'm in my house. And my
Disturbing.
door open. My baby boy, my oldest baby boy, is the only one that's here. The only one that's alive. She left them in the house by themselves. She left them in here.
When a young mother of four called 911 on October 13th, 2017, authorities were shocked to discover the tragedy that had unfolded in their modest Atlanta, Georgia apartment that Friday night. On closer inspection, though, the story didn't add up. Interviews with neighbors and family painted a disturbing picture, leading investigators back to square one. But what triggered such an act of cruelty? And who was really to blame for all of it in the end? Atlanta, the capital of Georgia, is the eighth largest metropolitan area in the U.S. It has a thriving hip-hop industry and was a major role player in both the Civil War and the 1960s Civil Rights Movement. The city remains predominantly black, with a stark racial divide and poverty. Known as the city that rose from the ashes, most of the city was burned to the ground on the orders of General William T. Sherman in 1864 during the Civil War. However, the city rebuilt itself and claimed the phoenix as its city symbol. Atlanta does have its fair share of crime, but remains a tight-knit community full of music and culture. And it's here this heart-wrenching case unfolds. On Friday, October 13th, 2017, a distressed mother of four, 24-year-old Lamora Williams, called the police to report that she'd found two of her youngest children deceased in the kitchen of their apartment. Moments later, 911 dispatchers received a second call from a man named Jamil Penn Sr., who claimed to be the father of the two boys who were allegedly found lifeless in his ex-partner's apartment.
I just received a call from my child's mother that two of my youngest two dead babies, my sons are dead in an apartment. Okay, there's a lot of background noise there. What in an apartment, sir? I just received a call that two of my kids are dead inside of an apartment.
In response to these two separate calls, police, firefighters, and ambulance services were dispatched to the scene and made a gruesome discovery. 2-year-old Jakarta Williams and 1-year-old Keontae Penn were discovered lifeless on the floor of the kitchen. They'd both suffered from severe injuries to their heads and were clearly deceased. What they discovered was unsettling, to say the least. Investigators wondered if it had been a simple accident or a case of neglect. They began by asking questions to both the neighbors and family members of Lamora Williams. Moments later, Jamil Sr. arrived at the scene and restated what he told 911 dispatchers on the call. According to the children's father, Jamil Penn Sr., Lamora called him and explained that both of the boys were deceased. She then ended the first call and switched to a video call. She turned the camera toward the scene of the incident, and Jamil knew instantly something was wrong. Jamil said it was like a real-life horror movie. He saw both his boys lifeless on the kitchen floor and called 911 immediately. The bodies of both boys were removed and taken to the coroner's office for an autopsy. The coroner's autopsy report made mention that both Keontae and Jakarta had been in the for a lengthy time. The statement read, "These thermal changes appear to be entirely from dry heat and changes from prolonged exposure to heat. It would require ample time to get to this degree." The coroner could not give a definitive cause of death, but ruled out blunt force trauma, as there were no broken bones. Meanwhile, back at the crime scene, investigators were still questioning family, friends, and neighbors when they stumbled across several clues that painted a disturbing and twisted picture. Many Pinned her back at Lamora herself. The first of these clues came from the 911 call she'd made. According to the call, she'd inquired several times whether she was going to be held responsible for the death of her children, even though she claimed she was not at home.
I understand that, but can you please help me? Like, can you please tell me, like, I don't want to get locked up because this is not my fault. I have just came home from work.
Investigators found it strange that she was concerned about being accused of murder rather than giving emergency response teams vital information to get to the crime scene. Another clue came from neighbors who said that Lamore's apartment had smelled of death for a few days. If the children had only been found that night, then that wouldn't have been possible. They also stated Lamore did not have a babysitter at any time. She often left the children alone at home while she went to work. But according to her 911 call, she alleged to have asked her cousin to babysit, but that cousin had disappeared by the time she returned to the apartment. However, there was more yet to be revealed, including the statement of Lamore's closest friend, Nisa Smith. Nisa was the first person that Lamore called that night. According to Nisa, Lamore had sounded distressed and told her that she couldn't do it anymore. Nisa told investigators that a month earlier, in September 2017, Lamore had quit her job because she could not cope with raising her children and maintaining a full-time job. Nisa told investigators that she tried to coax the truth out of Lamora during the call, as she was concerned for both her friend and the children. Lamora then allegedly revealed that both boys were deceased. Nisa urged Lamora to call the police and report the incident. Instead, she called the boy's father, Jamil, and showed him on the video call what had just happened. Police also said that the 3-year-old surviving child, Jamil Penn Jr., had allegedly witnessed the murder of both his siblings and repeatedly said that Mummy had hurt his brothers. This was also revealed by Jamil Sr.
He talks about his brothers, you know what I'm saying? He know what happened. He talks about it all the time.
Working with this information, investigators arrested Lamora Williams in the early hours of Saturday, October 14th, 2017, for the murder of both her youngest sons. She was detained at the Fulton County Jail while further investigations were being made. Sergeant John Challey of the Atlanta Police Department said that they'd searched for the unnamed cousin who was allegedly watching the children, but found no one. He added that it soon became clear that she'd been withholding information. At this time, investigators do not believe the children's mother left them with a caregiver. Investigators have developed probable cause to charge the mother with 2 counts of murder, he said. Investigators also removed the stove from the apartment in order to further prove the manner of death, as the coroner's report was still inconclusive. But what had driven Lamora Williams to such cruelty? There's scant information available about Lamora Williams. What we do know is that she was born in 1983 and lived with both her parents and older sister Tabitha in Atlanta, Georgia. Her close family and friends often called her by her nickname, Red. According to her mother, Brenda, and sister Tabitha, Lamora had suffered with mental health issues from a young age, possibly even since birth. This was confirmed in an interview with Jamil Penn Sr., who said he knew Lamora's parents very well.
You know her mother and her father very well, so, they always told me that she had, mental illness, when she was younger since birth. I never really was like, okay.
Lamora's mother, Brenda, said they'd struggled with her all their life. She was a slow learner. I had to pull her out of school and do homeschooling. She'd do simple things like cutting my other daughter with a knife and her own dolls' heads off. We only see this stuff in horror movies. I've been afraid since then, said Brenda. Tabitha Hollingsworth backed up her mother's statement, acknowledging that Lamora suffered with mental health issues that went undiagnosed for years. Despite all of Brenda's efforts to seek help, nothing worked in their favor. No one listened to her pleas. Teachers would say something was wrong, but the state said nothing was wrong. This is something the state didn't recognize. The whole state failed us, she said. When Lamora turned 18, she gave birth to her first child, a daughter named London Williams. However, the relationship with the baby's father did not work out, and Lamora returned to her parents' home. Despite this, Lamora and her ex-partner continued to co-parent in harmony along with his family, who assisted both financially and physically by having London over as often as possible to their home. It was soon after the end of this relationship that Lamora met Jamil Sr. According to Jamil Sr., they met through mutual friends and just clicked instantly. They both wanted to experience an adventurous relationship, and Jamil Sr. described her as being full of fun and enjoying life. Signs of her depression were not initially noticeable. Jamil Sr. described himself as being more of the hothead, and Lamora as the calm one in the relationship. Within 3 years of their relationship, Lamora gave birth to their first child together, a son named Jamil Penn Jr. Lamora and Jamil Sr. moved in with their parents and their baby boy as they saved towards starting their own life. But soon, tragedy struck. On April 20th, 2014, Jamil Sr. discovered the body of Lamora's father in his bed after he failed to show up for breakfast that morning. Reports suggest he'd suffered a heart attack sometime the night before. This seemed to be the catalyst for much of Lamora's mental health deterioration, as she was particularly close to her father and relied upon him as her pillar for strength. Family members agreed that, since the death of her father, Lamora had started to change drastically and became depressed. Jamil Sr. stood by Lamora, and they even tried for another child. Keontae was born soon after, followed by Jakarta. But this didn't solve the issues Lamora was facing. She developed a severe case of postpartum depression, exacerbated by having 3 babies in such close succession. Jamil Sr. and Lamora decided on a fresh start and moved out with their children to an apartment in Oakland City, a neighborhood in Atlanta. For a while, things seemed to be on the mend. However, within a year of Jakarta being born, their relationship had hit rock bottom. Jamil Sr. was frustrated in their relationship as Lamora sank further into depression, and so he decided to end their partnership. He did, however, maintain a close relationship with his boys. He visited them often and supported Lamora financially with raising the children. The breakup of the relationship put Lamora's mother on edge as she tried desperately to get the attention of child services. Brenda said that Lamora was just not right. She tried for months to get the attention of authorities, knowing something bad was going to happen if she was left alone with the kids.
I did tell DFACS everything because I wanted for them to either to give me the kids or get the kids out of her facility.
She even spoke to Jamil Sr., stating that she knew something bad was going to happen. She knew Lamora was going to do something to herself and or the kids. Brenda tried to acquire custody of the children by begging officers to remove them to her care. She called officials daily, reporting Lamora's strange behavior, but nothing was done. She eventually turned to the Division of Family and Children's Services, reporting her concern for Lamora's mental health, and claimed that Lamora was neglecting the children and not feeding them. Lamora's sister, Tabitha, backed up her mother's statement, claiming that Lamora often left the kids alone at home. She had issues, and the fact that the state failed her, that's a problem. She routinely left her children home alone and had even attempted to harm herself, said Tabitha. Following the deaths of both boys, the Oakland City community came out in support of Jamil and his surviving child. A vigil was held in honor of both children, with a visibly distraught Jamil Sr. telling reporters that, after seeing what Lamora had done, he had lost his soul. At the vigil, Jamil's sister spoke openly about what her young nephew saw.
My nephew, while he was watching whatever was going on in this house, and he came and talked to me and told me exactly what was going on. That baby seen everything.
Jamil then told everyone present that his boys were his entire life, and that they have now been ripped from him. A GoFundMe page was created by Jamil Sr. to help with paying for funeral costs and to assist with raising his surviving son. Moved by the enormity of the tragedy, funeral director Willie Watkins felt compelled to ensure both boys were given the send-off they deserved. He donated a plot at the Southview Cemetery, the oldest Black community cemetery, and secured a eulogy to be spoken by the great-nephew of the late Dr. Martin Luther King. Watkins emphasized that it was about the family and being there for them in their time of need. The boys were laid to rest on Saturday, October 21st, 2017, a week after their tragic discovery. The funeral service took place at West Hunter Street Baptist Church and was attended by many members of the community who came out to show their support. The pastor delivered a powerful sermon, encouraging the congregation to support the family. The boys' caskets were sealed, and Watkins arranged for the caskets to be wrapped in pictures of the boys and images of their favorite superheroes. Afterward, Jamil Sr. held on tightly to his surviving child as his boys were taken away on a carriage drawn by white horses. Watkins remained a pillar of support for Jamil and his remaining son. He offered them counsel through the difficult time. He'd spoken to little Jamil Jr. and explained that both his brothers were at peace and tried to help him process the traumatic events of that fateful day. He also explained to Jamil Jr. that one thing was for sure: his brothers were in heaven. Jamil Sr. has since reached out with phone calls to Lamora, who was being held at the Fulton County Jail without bail. Jamil Sr. said that Lamora showed no emotion, even when he asked her why she'd done such a thing. Her lack of remorse was disheartening, said Jamil Sr. As Jamil Sr. led the boys to rest, and Lamora Williams sat in jail awaiting her next hearing, investigators worked at developing their reconstruction of events based on the new autopsy findings and witness statements from family and neighbors. The new autopsy did not find an exact cause of death. However, there were several burn marks on the bodies, indicating that the stuff was used to harm the boys. It also included that most injuries were caused to both the boys' heads. Investigators believe that following her breakup with Jamil Sr., Lamora spiraled out of control, as backed up by both her mother's and sister's statements. She'd begun neglecting the children and placed them in harm's way by leaving them unattended while going to work and without any proper food to eat. Lamora, having been suspected of suffering from postpartum depression, began taking out her frustrations on the children. And combined with work stress and loneliness, she may have eventually lost interest in raising her children altogether. The statement provided by Nisa Smith painted a picture of a woman at her wit's end, as Lamora eventually quit her job in September 2017 to stay at home with the kids. This loss of independence, failure of not just one, but two relationships, and the depression of losing her father may have reached a fever pitch while she was trying to juggle raising 3 toddlers. Becoming overwhelmed, she may have just been looking for a way out by silencing her children once and for all. If police were to believe that Jamil Jr. witnessed his mother hurting his brothers, it was possible that Lamora may have used excessive force to control the boys, and in turn caused their deaths. If neighbor statements were in fact true, the boys may have been deceased since Thursday, October 12, 2017. Any time from 12 p.m. that afternoon to the next evening of Friday, October 13, 2017, at around 11:30 p.m. before they were discovered. It was also possible that Lamora Williams had used the as a way to cover up the actual crime. The 911 call was made as a way to create a cover story, investigators believe, as not only did she call Nisa Smith and confess to the deaths of her sons, but she also called Jamil Sr. before placing the call to 911. Furthermore, she had the presence of mind to make it appear as if she had simply discovered her children, rather than committing the crime by first blaming an unnamed cousin for neglecting her children.
I'm in my house. She left my door open. My baby boy, my oldest baby boy, is the only one that's here. The only one that's alive. She left them in the house by themselves. She left them in here.
In later interviews with investigators, she even blamed her sister for the children's demise. Investigators also said that the entire call and scene didn't add up, as she continuously asked the operator for reassurance.
I understand that, but can you please help me? Can you please tell me, I don't want to get locked up, because this is not my fault. I had just came home from work.
Had she truly been away at work and only discovered the crime scene, she may not have been so concerned about her own guilt, but rather concerned for the lives of her children. In the minds of the investigators and of the prosecutors, Lamora was responsible. It was up to the grand jury to decide her fate. On February 2nd, 2018, a grand jury indicted Lamora Williams on various charges that included murder, making false statements, aggravated concealing a death. The last charge was included after they heard that Lamora and Jamil Sr.'s 3-year-old son was in the apartment when both his siblings passed away. Lamora's mother Brenda had visited the Fulton County Jail, but was denied visitation. However, she did make a request to authorities that Lamora be placed on 24-hour surveillance, as she believed she posed a danger to herself. On May 30th, 2018, Lamora appeared in court for a status hearing ahead of her trial, which was set to begin in January 2019. The judge upheld the sentencing and charges, to which Lamora pleaded not guilty. She'd once again return to prison and be kept under high surveillance. However, since that court appearance, there have been no new updates or developments in her case. Given her evaluation since being incarcerated, there remains speculation that the court found her unfit to stand trial. It's widely believed that she may have been placed in a psychiatric facility to undergo treatment before being fit for a trial. Several reporters have allegedly attempted to discover her whereabouts and have not been able to find any records of Lamora on prison records or within the files of the Georgia Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Her records remain confidential. Looking back at the entire incident, Brenda Williams, Lamora's mother, was saddened but not surprised by what happened. My daughter is a sick person, if she did what I think she did. Brenda stands firm that Lamora was heading down a road of destruction and that the failure of the state led to the demise of her grandsons. I reported her to the district because I either wanted them to give me the kids or get the kids out of her possession, because at one time I thought she was just going nuts not feeding them, she said. Brenda has stated that she herself needs therapy after facing such an ordeal. When asked if Lamora was capable of such a crime against her children, Lamora's older sister Tabitha agreed that it was a probability. For Jamil, he's turned to prayer and sought therapy for himself and Jamil Jr. His only consolation is that both Keontae and Jakarta are together in a better place. As much as he wanted to see his sons grow up to become strong, independent, he was glad that their suffering was now over. I'm praying, and I'm glad that they don't have to suffer anymore, he said. He intends on being there at every turn to support his surviving son through the emotional turmoil he's bound to face as the years go by. Jamil Jr. can still remember what happened that evening as he recounts the story to his father daily. He describes everything, and when we talk about it more, he gets into full detail. He starts saying stuff that he's seen, said Jamil Sr. He's placed Jamil Jr. in therapy to help overcome the trauma he witnessed. He has a therapist because he needs to get that off his mind. It will be off his mind in a couple of years with the right therapy and counseling, said Jamil. But it was still bothering him, as there are times Jamil Jr. asks his father about his brother. It just broke me. He knows they're dead, but he still thinks that they're coming back, he said. He can't imagine what trauma his 3-year-old may be experiencing, as he himself is still haunted by the events of the night, and says he can still see the boys lying motionless on the kitchen floor every time he closes his eyes. Yet he refuses to let what happened to him make him a victim. Instead, he's using his loss to inspire others. I want everyone to use my story as a helping hand. I lost my 2 young boys to violence, and I want to be the difference maker in someone else's life to prevent a child from being hurt, wrote Jamil Sr. on his GoFundMe page. Today's case has given us all food for thought as we look back at what could have been done to prevent such a tragedy. Children. It's also important to note that government systems need to make mental health awareness a priority and address the issues in real time and not after a crime has been committed. Prevention is always better than the cure.